Alright y'all, so today I want to make a very quick video to give you my thoughts on a very weird and strange Fantastic Four film that we could have gotten in the late 90s to early 2000s. That would have had a script and story penned by Sam Hamm, who's mainly known for writing Batman 89, and would have been directed by Sam Weisman, who's mainly known for D2 The Mighty Ducks. This film is really strange, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. But in this video, I want to talk about like the history of it, the script by Sam Hamm, and kind of like my overall thoughts on it and why it was ultimately canceled. So to give you a little bit of history and context, it's kind of 1996 to 1997. Chris Columbus, who was attached to direct a Fantastic Four film, ultimately his project, his version of the movie ultimately collapses. Michael France, who was the screenplay he wrote with Columbus attached to direct, was deemed way too expensive, too big, and Fox wanted to get the budget down as the budget estimates were kind of putting that film up to a high 280 million. So eventually, all of it kind of came to a head. Chris Columbus decided to step down from Fantastic Four as director, but staying on as a hands-on producer. He cited a lot of the budget worries, but also Fox's inability to kind of stick to a vision, and of course, worrying about studio interference. While Michael France, who wrote Chris Columbus's Fantastic Four, decided to leave Fantastic Four and jump ship to Universal to write a Hulk film for them. So at this point, Fantastic Four was kind of back to square one. There wasn't really a director, there wasn't really a writer. Chris Columbus had stepped down to just a producer role. So Fox was kind of looking for a new director and writer to helm the project and also bring the spiraling budget back down. Eventually, they initially talked to Peter Segal, who was kind of mainly known for directing comedic films like Tommy Boy. They also got Phil Moore to basically rewrite the Francis script and kind of bring the budget down. Initially, Segal was interested in Fantastic Four, even being approached by Stan Lee, but eventually he decided not to pursue Fantastic Four. So once again, there wasn't really a new director on the film, and the project kind of langed in development hell for a little bit. That is until late 1997 when Fox decided to hire Sam Weisman, like I said, mainly known for comedic family films like D2 The Mighty Ducks. He became attached to direct Fantastic Four. Eventually, in spring to early 1998, in an effort to bring the spiraling budget down, Fox decided to let go of its previous writer, Philip Moore, and hire Sam Hamm to basically pen and rewrite the script for Fantastic Four. Now, at this point, just to give you a little bit of history and context on Sam Hamm. He is a guy that was basically known as the comic book guy in Hollywood. He had written scripts for Batman 89, Batman Returns, and tons of other superhero-related scripts, and was kind of known as the go-to superhero guy. Growing up, Sam Hamm was also a huge fan of Marvel Comics, reading tons of issues of Fantastic Four, allegedly. And he also made a statement talking about Fantastic Four when in discussing and writing this movie. He basically loved the Fantastic Four. Just to give a gist of the statement, he loved the team because basically they were relatable, that they worried about a lot of real-life issues that we have to worry about, like rent, food, other things. And Sam Hamm just loved that quality about them. Now, let's get into the Sam Hamm script that has been shown online for Fantastic Four, because it is definitely a wild one. There's a lot of elements similar to Francis drafts and also the 2005 film, but there's also a lot of wildly different things and concepts, and personally, I'm really mixed about it. Regardless, Sam Hamm's Fantastic Four script starts out with Reed Richards, who owns a corporation, has to sell half of his corporation or half of his things, all he invents, so to speak, to a billionaire by the name of Pace, in effort to fund an expedition to Mars. Reed Richards, Ben, who in this version are actually friends, get on a spacecraft to go to an orbital space station alongside Sue, who comes from the billionaire company that Pace owns. She's basically kind of an inspector, seeing that Reed's company is basically legit and there's no fraudulent activity. And he goes, of course, her brother Johnny also tags along with the trip. So all four of them go to this orbital space station, and they see all the crew members are on the station. And Reed Richards kind of gives Sue the tour of the station. Kind of a funny side note too, all the crew members on the station are wearing these like blue jumpsuits with the Four logo, so basically the Fantastic Four outfits in a lot of ways. Pretty cool foreshadowing, I have to say so myself. But Reed kind of gives Sue the tour. They mentioned that there's a scientist working on the station that Reed is working with called Victor Van Dam. He's kind of nicknamed Von Doom by a lot of people who work on the station because he's kind of an antisocial person and really hard to work with. Now, Reed, like in the France draft, is working with Victor on nanotechnology. And Victor kind of talks to Reed and shows Sue and Johnny and Ben more about what nanotechnology is. Kind of showcasing more of like what it can do, similar to France's draft. But in this version, instead of the lasers, it's kind of this weird multicolored goo that represents the nanotechnology. Now, Victor, in his version, doesn't have a arm, and that's one of the reasons why he's working on nanotechnology. He wants to use nanotechnology to grow his arm back. So similar to Dr. Connors and the Lizard, weirdly. But Reed points out to Victor that it's illegal to work on biological human stuff. Victor kind of gets mad at Reed because he wanted to experiment on some animals and work on himself, but Reed obviously persists it's illegal to do any of that activity. Victor, to the shock of Reed, has already experimented on himself, put nanotechnology on his arm, kind of showcasing a little baby arm that's kind of growing, kind of like the weird Deadpool part that showed off baby arms and stuff. Really weird reference there. That being said, Victor, in a feat of anger, very similar to France's draft, kind of sabotages the space station, takes 2 briefcases of nano agents with him, and tries to hijack the shuttle that Reed and Sue were on previously. They lock Reed, Sue, Ben, and Johnny in Victor's lab, and eventually the window of the orbital station where Victor's office and laboratory gets blown out. All 4 of the members fly out into space, but also the nano goo. And the nano goo, so to speak, gets all over the 4 of them and also causes malfunctions in Victor's shuttle. And eventually, the Victor shuttle kind of explodes, and the nano agents that were inside the briefcase next to Victor also merge with him as well. Now, 4 space members, so to speak, recovered the body, so to speak, but they're shocked they're alive. Then we kind of cut to like how it was in the 2005 movie and France's draft. All 4 of them are kind of placed into quarantine. They're all kind of figuring out their powers, but all things happen a little bit differently. For example, Sue figures out that she can actually use her abilities and be invisible. Johnny slowly, in a very similar scene to France's draft and also the 2005 movie, finds out his powers on a ski trip with a person that he met in the beginning of the movie. I also forgot to mention Johnny gets introduced the same exact way in the 2005 movie and France's draft, funny enough. So Johnny discovers his powers. Ben discovers it similar to France's draft a little bit. There's also a funny scene when they first get back down to Earth where Johnny does the whole thing to Ben, basically a big fake out, basically, kind of a foreshadowing that basically Ben's going to look like a monster, but at this point Ben is normal. Similar to France's draft and similar to the 2005 movie. So you see a lot of core elements end up in the final film that we got today. That being said, Ben discovers his powers in a reaction to trauma. So if he cuts himself or gets punched, a piece of orange rock will kind of blop out of his skin, showcasing a transformation into the Thing. There's a really weird part in the script where he's kind of with like a female person. Apparently they had sex or something, and then like she sees Ben have this little orange rock or like this little infection thing on his face, and she freaks out and she's like, "Oh my god, I might have an STD." Oh my god, that's a really bad scene in the movie. But eventually, Ben clearly finds out there's something wrong with him, and of course, all 4 of them end up back in quarantine. Reed kind of discovers his powers in a really weird way. He kind of wakes up one morning and kind of like falls into he basically forms into a giant puddle on the floor. And Ben kind of has to help him up. It's a really weird scene, and he has to use like a body mold. They basically allow Reed to keep his form. Kind of a really interesting way to showcase Reed's powers. I've never seen it done like that. That being said, things kind of proceed similar to the 2005 film and France's script. Dr. Doom in his version, or Victor, crashes onto a Russian Latvian-style ship, which I don't know if I forgot to mention, but Victor Van Dam in his version does come from Latvia. They do mention that his parents and his family died in a Latvian civil war, and possibly maybe that's where he lost his arm as well. That being said, he lands on this weird ship. He kills all the sailors aboard, and we find out that Doom has been transformed into some kind of metal humanoid machine hybrid with electricity powers and also wearing a green cloak. So I guess kind of like Ultimate Fantastic Four, but maybe without the weird horse-like legs. That being said, Doom kind of uses his nanites, so to speak, to sort of possess dead Russian sailors and basically to commit a terrorist attack. The Fantastic Four see this terrorist attack that's happening in New York City, and they eventually decide to stop it using their powers in kind of a lot of similar ways to France's draft in some ways. They eventually stop it. The media dubs them the Fantastic Four, and eventually, of course, the Fantastic Four decide to buy up the top floors of the Baxter Building. Yes, in this version, it is called the Baxter Building. It's not called the Four Freedoms Plaza, for Christ's sakes. Like in this version, Reed is trying to figure out a cure to everyone's problems, while at the same time, a lot of similar things happen compared to other drafts. Johnny is using his newfound powers to basically go on David Letterman, like the previous script, and use his new powers for fame. While Ben Grimm here, he slowly gets transformed into the Thing. He also meets Olivia Masters, kind of in a similar way, but we get more about the relationship in this script, unlike the previous script. More scenes explaining that Alicia doesn't really care about the looks of the monster, so to speak, cares about what's inside and all this stuff. And all the characters in the script, they kind of bicker with each other. Johnny and Ben still have that relationship like from the comic books. While Sue here is working with Reed, but she's also kind of waiting on Reed, so to speak, to make a move. So all the characters at some point are kind of frustrated with each other. Sue actually goes out on a date with Reed Richards finally after he finally asked her out. We also find out in this version that Reed Richards has Asperger's syndrome. Kind of a weird thing to mention, especially since they don't do anything with it. That being said, weirdly enough, after their first date, they decide to get engaged, which I personally think is way too quick, but that's besides the point, especially since I think Alicia and Ben's relationship in the script is much more natural. Ben also freaks out at Alicia's art show, and Johnny actually gets sued by some people earlier in the script that he tried to save. There's also kind of a cool montage at some point in the middle of the script that showcases the Fantastic Four stopping crimes and stuff, like Reed kind of Ben kind of stopping like a car chase, and Johnny also trying to stop another robbery. It's a really cool scene. It reminds me a lot of like the old Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies in a lot of way. There's even a part where like there's like a swirling newspaper that shows a headline, just like the Sam Raimi movies did with Spider-Man. Kind of cool, but that's besides the point. But eventually, all these things kind of come to a head when Doom, or Victor, so to speak, reveals his true intentions. As we find out that Victor needs more nanites to basically hold his physical form. And also we find out that the nanites are slowly taking over Victor's mind. So they're kind of splitting into a dual personality thing. Victor, who doesn't really want to be controlled by the nanites and obviously doesn't really want to hurt Reed, but is kind of forced to by Doom, which is another personality created by the nanites. And of course the nanites have their weird own agenda. He works with Pace, the billionaire from the beginning of the movie, to basically get resources and also kind of sabotage the Fantastic Four. Eventually, the nanites and the Doom personality, so to speak, consume Victor. And of course, now he's officially and fully Dr. Doom, I guess, so to speak. And in this part, he's basically about to reveal his master plan. Pace, when Reed kind of confronts Pace, who in this script there's kind of a weird, like, theater screening room that he kind of sits in all the time. It's kind of like those things you see in like reality shows that the host kind of walks around in. Besides the point, Pace kind of tries to warn about Victor, or Doom, so to speak, but it's too late. Doom reveals himself and basically attacks the Fantastic Four. Now, in this version, just like the 2005 movie, he talks to Ben Grimm, Doom, so to speak, and basically says that I can make a cure for you, and you don't have to worry about any of this stuff with being the Thing anymore. So just like in this version, but it happens a little bit differently. Like, Doom kidnaps Alicia Masters, Ben's kind of girlfriend he's seen. Ben kind of chases after Doom, and eventually Doom strikes a deal with Ben, basically to release Alicia and cure her blindness, so to speak, but also to get blood samples and nanites from all of the other members of the Fantastic Four, including Ben. But eventually, or excuse me, excluding Ben. Ben, weirdly just kind of haphazardly says, sure, which I don't really like how he just kind of agrees to it in this script. I think it's worse than it was in the 2005 movie. At least 2005 movie, there was some build-up. He's clearly distraught. There was an argument with Reed before, and then he just kind of accepts it. Here, it's just like, I don't know, he just like, the proposal that Doom is offering is even worse than it was in the 2005 movie. And Ben is so nonchalant about it, agreeing to it. But that's besides the point. Ben agrees to it, like the 2005 film and Francis' script, reverts back to Ben, and then obviously realizes he made a massive mistake. Just because, Doom is eventually going to use his new abilities to absorb the nanites from the other members of the Fantastic Four. He kind of does this and eventually becomes more powerful, gets a new physical form. Also, Doom in this version, unlike Victor, he's just so bizarre. Like Doom in this script makes tons of weird jokes and cracks and puns, and it just feels even worse in the 2005 movie. There's a part where, like, in his new form, he walks around Times Square in New York, and there's, like, someone playing a boombox, and he's just, like, dancing to it. I don't know what the hell that was all about. And so, like, he kind of makes a joke, too, to, like, he talks about, like, Victor / Doom kind of talks about with Pace, like, oh, I merged with, like, the spaceship's navigational system when I became this new form, so now I'll never get lost. Like, it's just, like, puns like that. I'm just like, bro, that's just bad. That's just bad writing. And, like, why would the nanites even have a personality like that is beyond me. That being said, Doom in this new form intends to actually suck up all of New York City and eventually Earth into his new body for energy and nanite reasons. And he starts doing this to the Baxter Building by absorbing the whole thing inside of his body. So, like I said, a really strange body horror element here. Ben obviously realizes he made a horrible mistake and eventually gets in contact with more nanite goo and eventually reverses his transformation back into the thing fully. He works with Reed, Sue, and Johnny, who are back together as a team, and they concoct a plan to stop Dr. Doom. Now, at this point, he has absorbed the Baxter Building and is starting to absorb all of New York City. So they concoct a plan, apparently, that with these new nanotechnologies inside all four of the members, apparently they have the ability to switch off and on their powers, which makes sense for the three of them, but for Ben, obviously doesn't make sense. They explain that, like, Ben apparently has some weird reverse nanites inside of him, and they basically concoct that, like, if they take some vials of Ben's blood and shoot it into the nerve center of Doom, it'll basically stop this whole thing and reverse his true form and all this stuff. So they obviously do that. They shoot his blood into the nerve center of Dr. Doom, who's been absorbing the building in all of New York. There was also kind of a weird scene where he also became, like, 8 foot tall. I think there was also maybe a scene, if I don't remember correctly, he also became the Statue of Liberty, but I could be wrong on that one. That being said, they shoot it into Doom's nerve center, destroying Dr. Doom once and for all, saving the day and becoming more of a strong team together, the Fantastic Four. Eventually, the movie ends with Reed and Sue getting engaged and getting officially married at the end of the script. And then we kind of get this weird-ass scene where basically Reed's apparently fantastic in bed and Susan Storm is invisible. So it's just, wow, what a way to end your movie, Sam Hamm. That being said, that was the supposed script for Fantastic Four that was penned by Sam Hamm that Sam Weisman was attached to direct. Now, ultimately, what happened to this version of the movie? Well, Sam Hamm would continue working with the studio, doing various rewrites. of his script to basically get it to Fox specifications and also keep the budget, spiraling down to a minimum. You can kind of notice the minimal of action sequences. This script really doesn't have a lot of too many big action sequences attached to it. That being said, Sam Hamm would continue to work with the studio, and but it kind of became clear that Fox and Sam Hamm and the director attached didn't really have a clear vision and not really the same vision at that. So eventually, Sam Hamm left the project alongside Sam Weisman later on in 1998 to 1999 due to creative differences, of course. And that ended Sam Hamm / Sam Weisman's version of Fantastic Four that we could have gotten. Now, to give you my overall quick thoughts on this movie. I don't know if my synopsis really described it well, but that being said, this script is not that good. I liked Michael Frantis' script of Fantastic Four, the one that Chris Columbus was attached to direct. It definitely had some issues. I mean, it was too long, too many action sequences, but it was still overall a pretty solid and good Fantastic Four movie. This movie, which would have been written by Sam Hamm, I think we really dodged a bullet by not getting this movie. I honestly prefer the 2005 movie that we got by Tim Story. There's just so many weird-ass stuff in this thing. I would say, to go into pros, Sam Hamm's definitely a good writer, because the way when I was reading this script, it reads well. Like, the way he describes things and writes dialogue and writes descriptions of things, it's very entertaining. It's very captivating. Like, when I compare the writing styles to, like, Michael France to Sam Hamm, I mean, Sam Hamm, in my opinion, he just writes better, if that makes sense. I'm not talking about the actual plot or characters, but the writing quality is at least good. It's also, the script is pretty well formatted. And there's some cool things, like I like the banter between Johnny and Sue and like all four of them. I like the change that he made that Ben and Reed are friends, which was one of the most annoying things of Francis' script. I do like the origin of their outfits. It seems to make more sense in the final movie that we got. The transformations, too, are also all really well done. How they all discover their powers is pretty unique and cool. Even Reed's, who has a wildly different and more goofy way he discovers his powers, I also really like that as well. Some of the other scenes, I think some of the action sequences, at the end and the ones with the terrorist attack, are all pretty solid for the most part. Even though I do prefer the version that we got in the 2005 movie with the fire truck and the whole bridge scene. I do kind of prefer that because it shows them actually saving people, while here it's more of just they stopping a terrorist attack and beating up people. So, yeah, I mean, I don't mind that part about it. And some of the dialogue's pretty witty. Reed having Asperger's syndrome is not a bad idea, but the big issue is that they don't really do anything with it. Reed and Sue not being lovers is okay, and I think the chemistry and the dialogue between them is good enough, but there needs to be way more development, and obviously that relationship moves way too fast. In my opinion, they should not have been married at the end of the movie. It makes more sense in the Tim Story movies when they actually marry in the second movie, because it gives them more time to be together. It makes sense. I also really like that Alicia and Ben here have a lot more time together to grow and develop their relationship compared to Michael Frantis' script, which I really have to enjoy that difference. I also like the fact that Ben spends a lot of time and beats up some Yancey street thugs at some point when he discovers his powers, which I forgot to mention that in my synopsis. He also beats up some Yancey street thugs, which is kind of a nice reference to the comics, because Ben was originally part of a gang in his youth, so I really enjoyed that slight reference. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's also a lot of really bad things. I think the biggest issue with this script is the interpretation of Doctor Doom. I have no idea what Sam Hamm was thinking with Doctor Doom. I mean, the idea that the nanites took control of Victor and then becomes like an alternate Doom personality, like a split personality, that's really weird. I don't prefer that. I prefer the Doom that we saw in Michael Frantis' script or other versions I've seen Doom. Just because, I prefer the Doom that's, controlling and has a giant ego attached to him. It makes a lot more sense. And also, when the nanites do take control of Victor and becomes Doom, he becomes all jokey and like dances in the street with a boombox in New York City, and it makes all these horrible puns. I'm just like, what the hell? Like were they trying to be super comedic out of nowhere? It really like hurts the script. Like the worst part, in my opinion, of this whole thing is Doom. And this whole idea of him absorbing things, like absorbing the Baxter building, all these things, I don't know, man. That's just too weird. And in my opinion, the whole nanotechnology angle that the France script did indeed use, but in my opinion, I think the extent it's used and the whole thing with it as a subplot is taken way too far in the script. It really gets annoying. I'm just like, enough with these nanites, enough with the nanotechnology. Like, I'm here for a Fantastic Four movie. I do not care about nanotechnology. And the Doom thing with him absorbing the Baxter building, like I said, that's just really dumb. That's just stupid. Like, I'm sure it would have been really visually interesting. I don't know how they could have accomplished it in like the early 2000s realistically, though. I just think it would have looked really silly. It would have had to be something done in animation. In general, too, like I said, Reed having Asperger's, I already mentioned it, but they do nothing with it. Also, Sue and Reed's relationship, way too fast. Also, the billionaire Pace character, he just really does nothing in this whole script. He really doesn't need to be there. It makes sense why in like later scripts with like Mark Frost and other writers and all the writers that wrote up scripts for the 2005 movie merged Pace and Victor's character together, because Pace really is like unnecessary. So I think he's kind of an annoying character, and I don't really care for him in this script. Johnny here is fine. I wouldn't say... I think here he's a little bit more... He's fine. I mean, he makes some decent jokes here and there. I do think it's really funny that he gets sued by people who he tried to save. That's kind of a really funny element. Never seen that before in the Fantastic Four movie. That's pretty good. Ben here in this script, I think, leading up to the events, like whole thing with him becoming a monster is okay. I do hate how he discovers his powers, especially with the woman that screams out about an STD. Oh my god, really bad scene. But him betraying Doctor Doom, just like in the 2005 movie, happens here, but it's like way more worse just because of the context of events and the way he just agrees to everything. I don't like that, to be honest. I really don't like that. And yeah, just overall, I'm not the hugest fan of Sam Hamm's script. I think if this was the version that eventually got made, I think Fantastic Four would have fared way worse on the big screen. I think there have been a lot more negative reviews. People would have obviously destroyed the movie and its interpretation of Doom. And, I mean, who knows, right? I don't know. And Sam Weisman, he's an okay director. I mean, he really hasn't done anything incredible, though, in his career. I'm not sure if he could have, like, brought a visual style to this movie that would have been amazing. So I don't know. I feel like we may have dodged a bullet. I prefer the 2005 film compared to Sam Hamm and Sam Weisman's version of Fantastic Four, definitely. So yeah, kind of want to give you my overall thoughts on this really weird script and on this lost and strangely weird canceled Fantastic Four film that would have came out in the late 90s to early 2000s. All right, y'all, have a good day. Peace.